It is torture. There is no other word for it. And it is slow, it is insidious, it is creeping, and it is all destroying.
Anya was 15 when she was sent to a retreat in southeast London run by a lay Catholic organisation. There they subjected her to transgender conversion practices, which included sleep deprivation. She's agreed to speak to us if her face isn't shown on camera. We've also changed her name.
While they didn't understand what they were doing, they were trying to cure me and my, what we now term, gender identity. They saw it as deeply flawed, deeply wrong, something I should be ashamed of.
It's a practice which will not be included in upcoming Westminster legislation.
It's just a joke. You know, there is going to be religious exemption, there's going to be the idea that you can consent to this. Nobody consents to conversion therapy.
The government says it's too complicated to include trans conversion practices in this legislation. Do you think it is?
It is complex. I totally agree that. But we can solve it very simply by agreeing that children need to be allowed to be children. They need to be allowed to be themselves. And if that means that some of them, approximately 1%, are transgender, they need support. They don't need to be told they're wrong.
We spoke to a transgender group which monitors the practice.
My understanding from other researchers in the field is that there may be an increase in conversion therapy for trans people in particular. It's difficult to say conclusively with the evidence that's available right now, because obviously it's a clandestine practice that people try and hide what degree that it's happening.
The threat of conversion practice is not the only issue trans people are facing right now. There's discrimination, there's violence, and many have concerns about being themselves in society.
In Cardiff, we were given special permission to film with this trans mutual aid group.
Yeah, not too bad.
Yeah, you've been making badges.
Yeah.
They normally turn down media requests like ours.
I'll be honest with you, I was very against you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Because it is at that point where I just do not trust journalists, because it's dangerous. We don't know where they're going to pull, you know. I mean, even you now, you could take everything we've said and completely butcher us.
It's not just emotional support offered here. They fix phones, provide meals and offer grants too.
We are disproportionately facing homelessness, abuse, starvation, poverty.
But there is value in them being together here.
Being a trans person is great. There's just so many great trans people to be around. It's really nice just sort of being myself. But in the UK specifically, it is a bit scary and quite depressing a lot of the time.
It's something Abby knows about.
Sharing your location so people know where you are, making sure you're planning your route to and from somewhere, not going anywhere unnecessarily, not putting yourself in undue harm's way. Because, I mean, you can speak to most of the people here, and I can guarantee you the majority of us have faced verbal and most of the time physical abuse.
And it's mental abuse from conversion practices that Shash, who helped set up this group, is still dealing with.
It's caused irreparable harm, that kind of trauma, you know, like that trauma of being forced to be someone I'm not for 2 years without, like, and I had so little control over my life. Like, I wasn't allowed to be my own person, and that's what conversion therapy is at the end of the day. You don't get a choice.
There's a split on how governments in the UK see this. The Scottish government's committed to including trans conversion practices in a ban. But even making it illegal, it may continue covertly, and so its survivors want its long-lasting impact to be clear.
Well, as you can see, Alan's in the studio with us now. Lovely to see you. But watching that piece, it's quite clear that distrust of the media is obviously a serious issue.
Yeah, I think that comes through. They talk about a lot of hostility on the front pages, sometimes daily news stories in which they feel like they're being attacked, stories about trans people which don't always feature the voices of trans people themselves. And this legislation not being trans-inclusive for them is another way in which they're being ostracised. Now, a debate is taking place just now in Westminster. I think we can see live pictures of that taking place just now. Worth noting that the government was meant to be hosting an LGBT Safe to Be Me conference this summer, but because of this legislation not being trans-inclusive, many LGBT charities were furious and pulled out, and that conference was then cancelled. They point out countries where conversion therapy bans do protect trans people: Canada, France, New Zealand. And for campaigners here, they feel like trans people here have been thrown under a bus.
And I know you've got another report next week for us, the next in your series. Alan, thank you very much for the moment.